The British Prime Minister's entire cabinet say they support Keir Starmer after the Scottish Labour leader called on him to stand down following the resignation of another top Downing Street aide. Mr Starmer is addressing his party's MPs this evening amid the ongoing controversy surrounding his appointment of Peter Mandelson as ambassador to the United States, despite his known links to convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein.
Today was always going to be a challenging one for Prime Minister Keir Starmer. It was made all the more so with news that his Director of Communications, Tim Allen, was quitting after just 5 months in the job, saying he wanted to allow a new number 10 team to be built. He's the second senior aide Keir Starmer has lost within 24 hours after his Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney, resigned over his role in the appointment of Peter Mandelson as ambassador to the US, despite his known links to convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein.
The Prime Minister is the architect of his own misfortunes, and all of the chaos and instability we're seeing is completely self-inflicted.
And that criticism from the opposition came even before this intervention from the Scottish Labour leader.
I have a genuine friendship with Keir Starmer, but my first priority and my first loyalty is to my country, Scotland. And I am not willing to sacrifice Scotland's NHS, our schools, our communities, our towns, cities, villages and islands to a third decade of an SNP government. That's why the distraction needs to end and the leadership in Downing Street has to change.
Anna Sarwar is the most senior member of the Labour Party to call for Mr Starmer to stand down. When the Deputy Prime Minister was asked if this was his position, it was a resounding no.
It went 14 years to get here. No.
And then on social media, after hours of cabinet silence, minister after minister pledged their support to Keir Starmer. It appeared to cool the threat somewhat as Keir Starmer headed into a parliamentary party meeting to address the Epstein-Mandelson controversy. And what next?
How long have you known about Andrew and Epstein?
But the impact of the Epstein controversy is being felt in another British institution too, with King Charles heckled today over the connection between the disgraced financier and his brother Andrew, the former prince. Thames Valley Police has said it's assessing claims that Andrew shared confidential reports when he was a trade envoy. The Prince of Wales, who has just arrived for a visit in Saudi Arabia, had earlier issued a statement with his wife, saying they were deeply concerned by the latest revelations about Jeffrey Epstein.
And Laura Fletcher joins us now live from London. And Laura, no doubt the Prime Minister will be buoyed by the fact that his cabinet supports him, but he faces the difficult task this evening of convincing his own MPs that he's the right man to stay at number 10.
Well, that's right, Tommy. I mean, this is really a very important meeting for the Prime Minister still, even though that threat has abated somewhat. Keir Starmer is going into that parliamentary party meeting, or indeed he's in it right now, to set out just what he and his government is going to do to address this ongoing controversy about the appointment of Peter Mandelson as ambassador to the US when we knew about those links that he had with Jeffrey Epstein. Now, we know some of what may be set out because the Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister, Darren Jones, set out some of that stall to the House of Commons a short time ago. He spoke about introducing some changes, being able to strip peerages, bolstering the vetting in an appointment process. But there's also some questions about what's coming down the tracks. Now, Darren Jones confirmed that those thousands of documents and messages, WhatsApp messages around that appointment will be released, but there's still no time frame for that. So there are still questions that are going to be answered. And indeed, Keir Starmer is going to be addressing a room of MPs, some of whom backbenchers had called for him to step down, others who said the party needs a drastic reform, and there are others who feel that really it's not right for the party that Keir Starmer leaves. It could create a big problem, an emerging threat, and really they wanted him to stay put, but that is for now.
Laura Fletcher at Westminster, thank you. Returning now to our main story and that continued uncertainty over the future of the British Prime Minister. We can speak to Patrick Maguire, chief political commentator with The Times and also co-author of the best-selling book Get In, the inside story of Labour under Starmer. Patrick Maguire, thanks indeed for joining us on the 6-1 on what has been a busy day politically. Behind you there we see the Palace of Westminster. That is where Keir Starmer will be meeting with his MPs this evening. What do you think his message to them is likely to be?
His message is, I'm very sorry, stick with me. And that, from the early reports from inside that packed standing room only committee room in the Palace of Westminster, is what is emerging. And there'll be a big outbreak, I expect, of performative loyalty, purely performative loyalty towards the Prime Minister, because today the Labour Party has basically concluded, despite its deep reservations about him, its deep disgust about what it's learned in the past week about the number 10 operation of the Prime Minister, that now is not the time. So the Prime Minister is still in peril. He's in a perilous situation, but the prospect of imminent peril, immediate peril, career-ending peril feels like it's receding here in Westminster tonight.
But the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney, is gone. His Director of Communications is gone. The Scottish Labour leader is calling for the Prime Minister to go. How long do you think Keir Starmer can hang on for, or can he ultimately survive this?
Look, be in no doubt, we are in the terminal phase of Keir Starmer's premiership. His departure is a question of when and not if. We have well past the point where it was a question of if, and every one of those departures and calls for his resignation that you've just mentioned is further proof that the Labour Party agrees on the terminal diagnosis but is hopelessly divided on the best prescription and also the sort of life expectancy of this premiership. It could come in just over a fortnight when one of Labour's safest seats in Denton and Gorton in Greater Manchester, where they blocked Andy Burnham, the very popular Manchester mayor, from running, could well be lost to either the Greens or Reform. That's a doomsday scenario to lose your seat, one of your safest seats, to Nigel Farage or the Green Party. Then, of course, in May, we've got local elections and elections in Scotland and Wales, and the Labour Party will almost certainly be walloped in them. And obviously, in between then, we've got the prospect of more disclosures about Peter Mandelson and what he was saying to people in government. Indeed, Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, one of the people who is eyeing Keir Starmer's job, has just published his correspondence with Peter Mandelson in an attempt to get ahead of this. So he may have stabilised his position for now, Keir Starmer, and for now I literally mean the next hour or so, but we just don't know what else is coming down the track and whether he is resilient enough and his operation is strong enough to withstand that pressure.
We saw today that the Cabinet has come out in support of him. I wonder, it's part of the reason that he's still in office is because there is no obvious contender, no obvious person to take over from him. And if there is to be somebody to take over, who do you think that's likely to be?
Look, the two names on everyone's lips here in Westminster are Angela Rayner, the former Deputy Prime Minister, and Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, who I just mentioned. But both of them are suffering from a case of sort of inopportune timing. Angela Rayner is still under investigation by His Majesty's Revenue and Customs over the issue that forced her to resign from Cabinet in September, the stamp duty she paid on her second home in Brighton. And Wes Streeting, as we've seen tonight, is still struggling to clarify and explain and get ahead of criticism of his previously close relationship with Peter Mandelson. So the time isn't right for those two. If it was, one or both of them would have seized the opportunity Anas Sarwar tried to make today. And there are others in the Cabinet who are spoken about. John Healey, the Defence Secretary, could be a safe pair of hands. Yvette Cooper, the Foreign Secretary. And that's the danger. Almost everyone in the Cabinet sort of fancies a crack, and that is not really conducive to a clean hit and clean succession, which is what the party really needs, or really feels it needs right now.
For now, Keir Starmer is in office. His Chief of Staff, however, Morgan McSweeney, a Cork native, is gone. As your book sets out, Patrick Maguire, there hasn't really been a time where Morgan McSweeney hasn't been associated with Keir Starmer in recent years. So Keir Starmer without Morgan McSweeney, it's sort of an unknown quantity, isn't it?
Yes, it really is. It's no exaggeration, as that book sets out, to say Keir Starmer didn't choose or hire Morgan McSweeney. Morgan McSweeney hired Keir Starmer to take back the Labour Party from Jeremy Corbyn. And since 2019, they've worked hand in glove on that mission. Morgan McSweeney, more than anybody else, was the architect of Labour's election victory and defined its often divisive internally style of politics. Now, without Morgan McSweeney, Keir Starmer has a lot of latitude to pitch left. That was the one thing Morgan McSweeney never wanted to do, and it might be what Labour MPs and indeed some of those voters who are abandoning the Labour Party for the Greens, their big challenger on the left, want to hear. But how he organises himself politically, how he makes arguments politically, and whether he can survive without his closest advisors, political counsel, is another question, and it's an unproven quantity, and it may well be a lesson that concludes very quickly indeed.
Patrick Maguire of The Times, good to talk to you, and thanks indeed for joining us on 6-1.